Well, I think that religious systems are descriptions of how people ought to act. And I think that those arose in a quasi-evolutionary manner. And so imagine, imagine the the dominance hierarchy structure of a chimpanzee troop or a wolf pack. Okay, so we'll use the wolf idea first and then switch, if it's okay, to the chimpanzee idea.
Mm.
So as a consequence of the behavioral actions and interactions among social animals, you could think of something that might be described as a procedural covenant arising, and that would be the animal's knowledge of the structure of the dominance hierarchy, which is kind of ill-named, but we'll use that for now. So that there's a hierarchy of of rank, and every animal in the social community understands that hierarchy of rank. That's essentially the culture of the troop or the pack. And there's an implicit recognition of the value of each individual within that troop or pack, such that, for example, if two wolves square off in a dominance dispute, of course they puff themselves up to make themselves look large, and they growl at each other, and they engage in ferociously threatening displays. And generally speaking, the wolf that has the lowest threshold for anxiety activation will capitulate first, generally without much more than the pose of a fight, and roll over and expose his neck. And then the dominant wolf will not deign to tear it out, basically. And you could think of the wolves acting out what you would describe propositionally as respect for each individual's value. And then in the chimp troops, Frans de Waal's research has indicated, for example, that if the dominance hierarchy is only based on brute force, and the chimp at the top, who's generally male, is there because he's a barbarian dictator, let's say, then he's very likely to be taken out by two male chimps, three-quarters his power, who are much better at social bonding and who've made a very tight compact between one another. And so that the chimp troop that's based on a tyranny is unstable. What de Waal indicated was that the chimp troops that tend to be more stable are run by dominant males who actually are very good at social bonding and reciprocity, and who pay a fair bit of attention to the females and infants in the troop. So the dominance isn't power so much as you might think of as good politics.
Mm.
And so there's an emergent ethic that, and I truly believe it's emergent ethic that's very similar to what Piaget described as emerging among children when they play games, that not only specifies the nature of the social contract, let's say, but also is structured as if the individuals within the social contract have some implicit value. So imagine that as human beings diverged away from their chimpanzee progenitors, the common ancestor we had with chimpanzees, we already started to act out this ethic. It was coded in our procedures, to speak technically, because we have a procedural memory. And then as we developed cortically, we watched each other and ourselves very, very intently. And once we developed language, we were able to start encapsulating that procedural ethic first in stories. And those stories were partly about what a very well-structured procedural ethic might be and how it might go wrong, but also about how an individual within that procedural ethic should be treated and should act. And the storytelling, which was the mapping of that procedure, was the birthplace of the image and story basis of religious ideation, as far as I can tell. So that's the basic thesis. It's like Piaget's notion that children, when they first come together to learn a game, if they're young enough, they can play the game when they're together. But if you take them out of the game and ask them individually about the rules, they give widely disparate accounts. So they've got the procedure in place, but they haven't got the episodic representation, technically speaking. It's only once they become more linguistically sophisticated that they can actually come up with a coherent representation of the rules. And then it's only later when they start to construe themselves not merely as followers of the rules, but also as originators of the rules. And that's akin to the recognition of, I would say, constructive individuality in relationship to the state. And so I see these things as very, very, very deeply biologically predicated.